Good afternoon and welcome to our SciTech lecture for November 2018. We are so glad to have everybody here today, and I know that you're going to enjoy our speaker. We have been doing SciTech for some time now. In fact, this is our 10th year. And during that 10th year, we've had right at 60 speakers, which is pretty astounding. And during the course of that time, we've also had about 3,200 people who have been here in person to witness the lectures. The lectures mostly have been recorded and are on YouTube if you're interested in going back and watching some old goodies as well as some of the new things. And these things can be accessed through the biotechworkforce.org website. And we hope that you will visit that and look at the information there. And now I'd like to invite Nancy Johnson to introduce our speaker.
You are ready to speak. I am so excited to introduce you today to a global leader for an ag tech company located in the Piedmont Triad of North Carolina and right here in Winston-Salem. So Andrew Hebard is the president, CEO, and I see founder of Tech Crops International. And just to put it into context for you, agriculture is an $86 billion industry for North Carolina. We have about 700 ag-related companies, 100 ag tech companies, of which 12 are right here in the Piedmont Triad. So in the Triad, we have not only smart companies like Tech Crops, we also have some unique assets like the North Carolina Center for Viticulture and Enology, the North Carolina Zoo, the North Carolina Department of Agricultural Upper Research Station, and we also have one of our two land-grant universities at North Carolina A&T, among many other assets for the state. And we also have a number of highly engaged community leaders like Andrew. And the Techonomy report in 2016 showed that we as a region contribute, I believe it was $7.8 billion to the ag economy for the state. So it's pretty substantial. And I just want to tell you that there's a wonderful bio in your packet on Andrew. But having a leader like him, a thought leader in this community, is very important. So we're glad to have him here. I do want to tell you that some other things about Andrew is that, he is very committed to the community. He serves on our advisory committee for biotechnology in the Piedmont Triad, which advises our North Carolina Biotechnology Center office, so thank you for that. And you know what? Andrew's just a fun person. He is fun, he is focused, he is a family man. His wife, Emma, is here. They have 2 daughters and numerous animals at home, is what I understand. And we're very, very happy to have him today. And I hope that you will listen intently, that you will ask all sorts of questions. And Andrew, I think we are ready to dig in. So tell us all about Soil to Oil. Thank you.
Gosh, Nancy, is that on? Can you hear me? Let me just move this up a little bit here. How's that? Is that okay? Is there a volume? Okay, how about that? Just, if you can't hear me, just raise your hand and I'll speak louder. Gosh, what an introduction, Nancy. Will you come everywhere with me and build my role up, especially when I need job interviews or anything else? That would be awesome. Thank you so much. I don't think I can live up to half of what you've said about me, but thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today and talk a little bit about omegas from soil to oil, addressing a scientific need with a sustainable and natural solution. Quick show of hands, how many of you have heard of omega-3s? Well, that's a good start. I've got the right audience in front of me. A little bit of history about myself. Nancy's already told you too much about myself, but here's a little bit more. I'm an agricultural scientist by training. When I graduated, I didn't have enough money to buy a farm, so I went into commodity trading, and I wasn't very good at commodity trading, so I didn't stay at it very long. But my passion is about combining sustainability, wellness, nature, and science, and trying to create a business model out of all of those components. And over the years, I managed to build a network of friends and scientists, inspirational leaders, that really helped me find a path as to how to build a business in this space. And in 2004, for the reasons that Nancy mentioned about how rich and vibrant the community is in North Carolina for agriculture and ag biotechnology, we moved here to Winston-Salem. And I founded a group of small international companies with a real focus on doing good for people and doing good for the biosphere. And our way of doing that was to build sustainable and risk-managed supply chains for natural products. And how we do that is we have this sort of step process where the first thing we identify is new plant species and harvest the seeds from those plant species that might have health benefits either to people or to animals or to the environment. And from that, we do a breeding process to develop elite genetics. We then take those genetics and we do field testing with them to make sure that they'll grow in the open door field environment. So we're competing with crops like soybeans and corn. So these crops have to stand their own in an agricultural environment where they may have only grown in a greenhouse environment. We then enter into long-term crop production agreements with farmers, and we do that pretty much globally from Chile to Canada, from New Zealand to South Africa and to Europe, depending on what the crop is and what level of functionality that crop is supposed to deliver. We then move the production of the crop to our processing facility on Prince Edward Island in Canada, and we process it there and we supply an oil. And most of our products are oil, as our strapline says there, from soil to oil. And importantly, all of these crops are specialty. They're not commodity crops like soybean or corn or canola. They're things that farmers wouldn't ordinarily grow on their own without knowing that there was an end market. And they're crops that our end customers wouldn't ordinarily rely on the open market to buy from without entering into a long-term supply contract. So we try to take the risk out of the whole supply chain. And here's a few examples of crops that we grow. Any one year we might be from a few thousand crop acres to a few 100,000 acres in different parts of the world. High oleic sunflower is grown for infant formula, particularly. Echium is a source of omegas. Hyorusic rapeseed goes into pharmaceutical applications, biolubricants. Bog myrtle is a native of Scotland, but it's in insecticidal properties. Apparently, the Vikings used to infuse beer with bog myrtle before they went raping and pillaging give them a bit more oomph in their longboats, I think. And Abyssinian and cranberry oil we grow for the cosmetic market, and meadow foam is an interesting oil that mimics sperm whale oil that was harvested from the heads of sperm whales and used in cosmetic applications. So you can see all of these crops can be grown. They're grown sustainably and traceably. But I'm here to talk more about omegas. And so what about omegas? You've heard of them. Many of you probably take them. And many of you will have seen in certain press releases that there is scientific controversy around them. And that generally goes back to conflicting data surrounding whether or not they actually have cardiovascular benefits. And they're one of the most studied chemicals of probably any natural product. And for every piece of controversy to say that they don't work, there's science to say that they do. So the jury is very much out on that, and we recognize that. But what I wanted to focus on is where there's scientific consensus. And this is really quite a sort of straightforward message for everybody, I think. And that is that every cell in your body, every cell in my body, contains omega-3s. They're an essential component of our cellular structure. So they deliver certain functionality, and they are critical to many metabolic pathways, most notably inflammation management, hormonal regulation, and optimal efficiency of your central nervous system. And here's the thing, they're essential in every cell, but we can't make them. So regardless of the science behind efficacy, it's an absolute fait accompli that we have to ingest them from our diets, because if we don't ingest them, we can't make them. All we can do is convert the ones that we intake. We're an obligate consumer of omega-3s, in other words. So we ingest them from various sources, fish, eggs, milk, etc., and then we convert them into more sophisticated omega-3 molecules. An insufficient intake of omega-3 or an imbalance of omega-3 and omega-6 leads to negative health outcomes. Again, there's no disagreement over that, and there's little disagreement over the fact that most Western diets are deficient in omega-3 and they're excessive in omega-6. And omega-3, as I said, is found in fish, it's found in nuts and seeds. Omega-6 is typically the oil that is used in fast food, soybean oil, corn oil, and of course it's pervasive in our diet. So that's why we're getting such high levels of omega-6. Of course, behind all of this, there's a business rationale as to why we went into the market of trying to develop sustainable and plant-derived omegas. And the market is reported as being $3 billion per year at the ingredient level and $18 billion a year at the consumer level. That's an enormous market. And omega-3 supplements are one of the largest popular regularly taken supplements, along with vitamin C, glucosamine, chondroitin, turmeric now, or curcumin. And that $3 billion equates to about 180,000 tons of oil a year. Most of that is fish oil, and it's wild harvested from sardines, menhaden, pilchards, and extracted and then sold into the human and animal nutrition markets. The omega-3s are almost one of the most studied, scientifically verified nutrients, with over 80% consumer awareness in a positive sense. So people associate omega-3 consumption with positive health outcomes. And approximately 10% of adults in the US take fish oil. And yet, despite all that, most diets remain concerningly deficient or imbalanced in their omega intake. And I think a big part of that reason is that fish oil just lacks innovation. And I do have an axe to grind in this area, but fish oil is a gross product. It smells awful. Harvesting animals from the wild to extract oil, it tastes awful. It sticks with you all day long. And there's no other way of looking at it. Fish oil, no matter how you dress it up, is always fish oil. And those of you that take fish oil, you know what I mean. So the opportunity that we homed in on was to find a plant that could actually replace that gap in the market, fill that opportunity in the market. But in order to do that, it had to deliver certain traits and certain value. And the first one is that it must deliver a complete and balanced and superior and cost-effective source of omegas. It must be able to be grown by farmers that would ordinarily grow other crops, because you can't go to a farmer and say, grow this crop, but by the way, you need to spend $250,000 on new machinery. So we looked at, can it be grown by farmers that grow canola or wheat or what have you? And it must deliver certain robust things like scientific validation. Will it stand up to human clinical trials? And we've invested very heavily in validating the science behind these with 3 human clinical trials to date. It must be safe, so it passes allergenicity, toxicology testing. It must deliver certain environmental needs. It can't be an invasive species. Many of you know that plant called kudzu. Well, I don't want to be the guy that introduces the next kudzu to North Carolina. So we're looking for a plant that isn't invasive species, and it's biodiverse. It adds something to the rotation on a farm that provides habitat for butterflies, for bees, for other plant species. So it fits in an environmentally sound crop rotation program for farmers. It must meet consumer acceptance, so it must taste okay, it must smell okay, and we're seeing a real growth in the vegetarian and vegan markets, which of course plant seed oils comply with. And it needs to deliver value for everybody in the chain, everybody from farmers to processors to consumers. And So distilling all that down after 16 years of research and it's probably closer to $10 million of investment, Buglozoides arvensis, which is the species we homed in on, became an overnight success, as they say. And that's what we went on to call ahi flower. And of course, those of you that have heard of ahi tuna, we played the name on ahi and flower and trademarked it as ahi flower globally. And that's what it looks like in the field. It's a little white flower, probably only about 1/4 of an inch across, and it produces little seeds that we then press and take the oil out like you would for olive oil. So a little bit about the species. It's a native plant to many temperate growing regions of Europe, North America, and Asia, pretty much through the sort of Central Asian area, everywhere from the Ukraine right through to Mongolia is where we found the largest genetic diversity. And there's a group of people called ethnobotanists. And these are the guys that go out and look for species like this, and they harvest the seeds, and they bring back the seeds, and that's what we evaluate, and then we breed from to make sure that we've got the right varieties growing in the right regions. It's a very finicky plant. It would rather not grow than grow, and as the proverb goes, you should reap more than you sow. I think for the first 5 years we reap less than we sowed, and that's not a good thing in crop production. But with good sound agronomy and good genetics that we've developed and really attentive crop management, it's now producing about 1 ton an acre. Very prolific plant if it's grown properly. And it has the richest, most biologically advanced omega content of any crop that we've discovered. And we went through a big process screening plants that could meet all of those criteria. And this is the one that we homed in on. We're really pleased with the success so far. It's been embraced by farmers. It's profitable and it's biodiverse for their farms. And we now grow it on thousands of acres in the UK. And here's a picture of the crop grown somewhere near Yorkshire, I believe. And here's a drone footage of it just coming up to harvest. Those brown fields are all ahi flower. So a little bit of a factoid page now for you, just to sort of so you can wow your friends and neighbours with some statistics. If you take omega-3 fish oil supplements, 1 month of a concentrated omega-3 from fish oil will take approximately 13 pounds of fish to make. It's quite a lot of fish, actually. That's a decent sized salmon. And I'm a liar. I'm a fisherman and I'm a liar, so that's a really big salmon. Or about 2.5 pounds of krill. But it takes 1 pound of ahi flower seed to produce that same equivalent of oil. And fish and krill take about 2 to 4 years to reach maturity, and ahi flower grows in 6 months. 1 acre of ahi flower can produce as much oil as 40,000 sardines. And when you harvest sardines or krill and you extract the oil, you only get 2% oil. The rest of it goes into animal feed as a sort of protein for animal feed as a byproduct. And ahi flower has 25% oil. So it's a very sustainable, very rich source of an oil that we're seeing increasing demand for. And the demand for omega-3s is exceeding sustainable supplies. And that's why you see in the news about concerns from environmentalists where the primary food source of seabirds, of seals, of dolphins, of marine mammals is being kind of plundered by humans at the moment to create fish oil. So we're trying to do our bit by growing sustainable plant-derived sources of it. And of course, whales are happier. Isn't that a cool picture? I wish that was me underwater there, but it's not, unfortunately. And here's a quick video that I would just like to share with you. It's only 2 minutes, but this probably tells more in 2 minutes than I could tell in 2 hours about our business and what we're trying to achieve.
This is our field of dreams. We've built our hopes and promise of something better in these simple flowers. Ahi flower, a truly sustainable omega oil source. At the heart of these flowers is a decade of non-GMO research and development, bringing together a community of essential fatty acids for an active, healthy lifestyle. And we're doing it in a responsible way that cares for the land as much as the land cares for us and our families. To offering a better way to make healthy choices. because it's not enough to be healthy ourselves, but they're also ensuring we're keeping the planet healthy too. Being better than flax and not from fish means ahi flower oil is not derived from our already overburdened oceans and is a richer, more effective source than flax. It supports daily nutritional needs in a way that's kind to our bodies and to the earth we share. It's not just what we create, it's how we create it. And it feels good to do the right thing. Ahi flower oil.
So there you go. That's just a little snapshot of, we pulled that together with the farmers that we work with in the UK, and we use it to sort of explain to our customers and the consumers to why we're doing what we're doing and the benefits. And of course, what you're trying to do is convey an important message, but not weigh people down with the science. And that's where I think a lot of the industry loses its way. It becomes so science heavy, it actually causes more stress than the benefits of taking omega-3s will offset. So this slide, for some reason, got a little bit fractured and isn't coming up very well, but I'm going to just try and wade my way through it very quickly. And I talked about the controversy behind science and omega-3s, and there's a lot of argument as to which omega-3s are better. Can I get them from flaxseed oil? Can I get them from chia? Ahi flour is because it has a unique fatty acid called stearidonic acid, which is right here, and it should be right there. But SDA is stearidonic acid. And here's the real sort of nuts and bolts of omega nutrition. And when we as humans ingest plant-derived omega-3, we take in alpha-linolenic acid, ALA. It's what's in walnuts, it's what's in flaxseed, it's what's in chia. When you have muesli bars, ALA is the plant source of omega-3, and it's most commonly found in flax. Well, when humans ingest it, we work through a series of metabolic pathways here, and we convert it to EPA. And EPA is what's found in fish oil. And when you look at your fish oil supplement things, it says how many milligrams of EPA. So really, this is what people are looking at, is the EPA conversion. When we ingest plants, how much EPA do we synthesize? And the studies that we've done, the studies that many people have done, shows that humans are really quite inefficient at converting ALA to EPA, between 3 to 6%. So when we take in flaxseed oil, and flax has its own benefits, of course. I'm not saying that flax isn't a good product. I'm just saying that we're not very efficient at converting ALA to the end game here, which is EPA. So we look for a plant that contains this fatty acid here, SDA, and how effectively that converts. It's exactly the same pathway, so we're not introducing anything into the human diet that we're not making ourselves, but we can convert ahi flour at 30 to 40% of what we ingest to EPA. It's a huge difference. And there's one reason for that. It's this fatty acid, this enzyme here called delta-6 desaturase. And that is the rate-limiting step in many humans. Either we're genetically predisposed to having a poor conversion, or our lifestyles result in poor conversion. Age, smoking, alcohol consumption will all impact conversion, as will what other fats we have in the diet. So there's a lot of things at play here, but the simple way of looking at it is that ahi flour is just a much more effective way of getting to the end point here. And the importance behind that is that ahi flour increases icosapentaenoic acid, or EPA, synthesis more than any other plant-derived omega-3, and we can sort of validate that with science. Just a few charts here. How we verified that is we
Plant.
So the plant it flowers, and then it sets a seed like a sunflower would. So we harvest the seed. The crop automatically dies down, and we harvest it when it's what you call senesced, and you harvest the seeds. The biomass left after the harvest is very, very light. It's like straw. That all gets returned to the soil. Meal that's left over, we put back on the field as well. So the meal is like a compost. So that goes back on the land. So really, the only thing left that leaves the field is the oil.
Could the meal be used in any sort of animal food stock?
It can. It's not particularly highly nutritious for animals, so it actually has a better value adding back to the soil as a soil amendment for soil nutrition.
So what sort of crops have you replaced when you talk about the farmers there in the UK? What sort of crops have you replaced? And along with that, what about insects? Do you have to spray it with anything, or is it organic and I just plant it and it grows?
Okay, so
I listened to the deer like it. I saw that picture. Take that.
well, I wish we could grow it organically because it's a little bit finicky. It needs a little bit of nurturing to get to motivate it to grow properly. It's very resistant to disease, so we don't use herbicides on it unless we have to. And it's really quite resistant to insects. It attracts insects from a pollination point of view, so bees and butterflies, but we don't really get too many predatory insects on it. From a crop nutrition point of view, it does benefit from some nitrogen being added to it and some phosphate and potash. And from a crop replacement point of view, it would typically be a barley crop, something like spring barley or spring linseed, which is the same as flax. Sorry?
What are you going to make your beer out of? I'm going to take the barley away.
Well,
I'm
so
kidding.
we wouldn't replace a malting barley crop. We don't even replace a feed barley crop that goes to donkeys. So we're very selective with which barley crops we replace. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, could you tell me how many years you've been producing this plant and how many years your products have been on the market?
So we first planted our first crop 16 years ago, and it took a long time to get it right. I mean, it really was very, very difficult, and we didn't do any genetic modification. We just looked at it and thought, there must be a way, if it survives in the wild, there must be a way of making this grow. We've just got to figure out how. So it's critical things like the date of planting, the soil temperature at planting, the date of harvest, the level of pH in the soil. So that took many years, but our first crop was 16 years ago, but it was only about 5 years ago that we started growing it at the thousands of acre levels with farmers. And we formed a club, imaginatively named the Ahi Flower Growers Club. And what we did is we got these farmers to form a co-op, effectively, and share best practices. And if you give farmers freedom to operate, they do a really good job. And the farmers we're working with are some of the best farmers in the world. I really believe that. The guy there, Simon Parrish, is outstanding because they want to learn how to grow it. It's like being a gardener, and some of these guys have just got green fingers. So they shared the information, and now it's a very prolific crop that they actually enjoy growing. And lastly, I think your last question was, how long has it been in commerce? Nearly 2.5 years. Would be our first launch, and our sales are sort of increasing year on year, and now we're getting some of the much larger brands, like I mentioned Target, and other retailers like that are starting to come on board. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what's your per acre hectare productivity? What's the sort of average that you're seeing?
About 2,000 pounds an acre.
And that's 2,000 pounds raw seed, finished seed?
Finished clean seed, yeah.
How much oil will come from that?
About 500 pounds.
500 pounds?
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
about
per acre?
yeah, it's about 24 to 25% oil. Yes.
If you have bees there nearby, does the EPA, is it EPA? Does it increase in the honey?
That's a great question. We haven't seen that, but we do encourage farmers to put beehives out in the fields. The better the pollination, the better the seed yield, obviously. Fatty acids don't tend to translate from the pollen to the honey. Other things do, sugars and things like that, but fatty acids don't tend to transfer into the honey.
And is it possible to make tea from this? A tea?
I guess you can make tea from anything. I'm not sure what it would taste like, but we haven't tried it. But maybe.
Probably be better than fish oil.
I think anything would be better than fish oil tea. Yes.
We all know farmers, probably being outside, have a very good source for vitamin D production in their own bodies. But I'm just wondering if any research has been done to determine Because fish oil is often used for vitamin D3, how that might relate to this kind of oil.
That's a great question, and we haven't studied that, but that's something actually you've got my mind thinking now about part of our further research. That's a really good point, actually.
Okay. And can you buy the seed just like you can buy flax seed in the store?
No, it's
not consumable.
quite difficult to process, and when you press the seed, you still need to refine it, because the seed will come out as quite dark and have a high particulate matter in. So we tried to put it through a gentle refining process so it looks more like an olive oil type of product rather than something straight from a press. Yes, sir.
With being able to purchase, buy, sell, modify the seed, how can you assure that you own the right one, the best one, the good one, and avoiding to fall into Monsanto's, Bayer's hands in order for them to modify it, and later on coming to you and saying, you have to have my seed, not yours?
That's a really good question. That's the one that keeps me awake at night. So the simple answer is you can't. I mean, you can't protect it legally from a point of view if somebody wants to genetically modify it or do something else with it. Ultimately, the consumer decides as to, when you market a product, the consumer decides as to whether they want to eat a GMO product or a non-GMO product. We typically find that where there's a higher level of consciousness or awareness about nutrition and the environment, the sort of health food movement, there is a greater reluctance to consume genetically modified organisms. So that's one of our biggest opportunities, really, is that we say we're not going to genetically modify this. It's a natural, sustainable, biodiverse source. But somebody could take it and they could breed from it and they could then introduce it as a better plant. What we've got to do is we've got to stay ahead of the race. We can't get complacent and say, oh, our job's done, we're just not going to grow it. So we invest very heavily in furthering the agronomy and furthering the know-how of the plant and finding better varieties. But we don't have the resources available to us that some of those large biotech companies do. But I also think, probably realistically, that even if it was tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of acres, it would still be a highly specialized crop relative to the millions of acres of soybeans that are grown. So I think there's a big enough universe for us all to operate in. The large seed companies are working on crops where they can put their own chemicals on the seed dressings, their genetics, their crop chemicals, and the small, more specialized ones are really to companies like Technology Crops, my company. Yes, sir.
You talked about using like sustainable environmentally friendly practices. Can you go into that? What does that mean to you?
So the main thing will be, we have a crop growing process called Crop Assured 365. And that, as it says, during 365 days a year, we're assuring that crop will comply with certain standards that we require growers to follow. And that'll be everything from when they fertilize. So we don't want fertilizer put on when it's going to leach into the rivers. We will want conservation headlands around fields so that you'd have a strip there where you might have good foraging area for wildlife, for birds and native flowers. We don't allow any prophylactic treatments of the crop with herbicides or pesticides. We'll go and look at it and say, yes, you need to do something with this. So we're trying to grow it as closely to chemical free as possible. So it's done on prescription rather than prophylactically. Those would be the sort of things that we're doing. We want to make sure that it fits into a rotation with other crops as well. It's, of course, when you talk about sustainability and natural, it's a very big area, and one man's sustainability is another man's completely non-sustainability. So that would be the sort of thing we follow. And Sarah at the back there, yes, I saw you raise a hand. Oop. Sorry about that.
Do you fear the spreading of tar sands or bituminous oil that can destroy your crops or plant life?
That's a good question. Not specifically that activity, but we do. You know, I think farmers are some of the best custodians of the environment, and anything that impacts the environment negatively, whether it's leakage or what have you, or erodes the quality of the land on which they're operating, is a threat. So I wouldn't say that specific area, but it's something we're very mindful of. And we've had instances where we've grown other crops, for example, near power stations, and they will, how can I put this? If the plant assimilates or translocates some of those chemicals that the power plants will give off, they will be found in the oil. So we have to be very careful about the environment in which we're growing crops and how crops can suck something out of the ground. It's quite a common process to use some plants for what they call phytoremediation, and they will actually suck toxic chemicals out of the soil. And then, of course, you've got to decide what you do with the crop once it's taken that chemical out of the soil, whether you incinerate it or bury it or what have you. But plants certainly can take up, you know, toxic materials, so that would be a potential threat if you were in that area. Yes, sir?
Wait a minute.
So I have a guy in the UK who's an agronomist, who's like a plant doctor, and he goes out and inspects the crops. Gosh, if a farmer phones him and says, "Simon, can you come out and look at my crop?" He goes out and looks at it and will diagnose what might be wrong with it, whether it's a nutritional deficiency, or it's a disease, or it's a pest, or what have you. So, you know, the health of the field, the health of the crop, is something we take very seriously, and it's usually done on a case-by-case basis. And you can look at a plant fairly well visually and know whether or not it's thriving or it's a little bit sick.
So sometimes do you happen to, I mean, no crop is perfect, I know that,
Yeah.
but have you ever gone in a worst case scenario where you really had to, you know, pay real good attention to the plant before you distributed it?
So that's a really good question. We never see, and we haven't seen, any issues where the health of the plant impacts the quality of the oil coming out of it. So no matter what this health status of the plant is, it doesn't usually affect the quality of the oil that would come out of it, but we do test for that. It more affects the health of the plant as to whether the farmer is going to harvest it or not. So we will have situations where if it's a particularly bad season, or the crop's been flooded or frosted or droughted out, we may look at the crop and tell the farmer, you're better to plough this field in and plant another crop on top of it. If he decided not to and harvested it, it wouldn't change the quality of the oil, it would just greatly reduce the yield that he gets. Is there something?
Genetically modifying plants is not popular, but DNA editing is. Is this something to consider with this seed?
Very good question. You're probably aware, so the gentleman asked about DNA editing, or a technology that's more widely known as CRISPR technology, where instead of it being genetic engineering and sort of inserting DNA from other species into another species, DNA editing is basically taking out, identifying certain components and removing them from the plant. And those components might limit the plant's adaptability, or it might restrain the yield. So there's an argument for saying CRISPR technology or gene editing could be used. It's not something that we would use, and there was a ruling in Europe last month that they said gene editing is, from a labeling point of view and a regulatory point of view, is the same as genetic engineering. So the jury is still out, I think, as to how widely that will be embraced. We feel that we've made such strides with the crop without going down that route. We really don't need to go down that route. We want to carry on doing what we're doing and looking at it from a point of view, how can we grow this better? How can we learn how to grow this better through being better agriculturalists rather than genetically modify it or genetically alter it?
I have a question about your father-in-law. How long has he been taking IE flour, and what benefits has he stated that he's gained from taking it?
What a good question. So he was probably one of our first consumers when we first brought the product to market. So, and we had prototypes before we launched it. So he's probably been consuming it for 5 years since we've been making it. And the most common comment that, so he's called Peter, and the most common comment that we get from most people is that I just don't ache anymore.
Can I get some of that?
Yes, you certainly can.
Because I ache all the time.
Okay, no, don't ache anymore.
So Andrew, you can see that our students are starting to trickle out here, but I want to thank you on behalf of the National Center for the Biotechnology Workforce and the Math, Science, and Technology Division. And also I have Bill Green here, who's from our foundation, and you might see these beautiful white folders. These are from the foundation. Okay. This was a spectacular lecture.
Thank you.
You answered all your questions so beautifully, and that's the part that we really like. And I think our faculty here are very, very impressed with your ability to address the questions. So Nancy, thank you for coming over and introducing Andrew. Really appreciate it. And I just want to let you know that we have a small token of appreciation here. And this is your degree, and you earned it.
Wow! Thank you so much. How great is that? That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
I just want to mention one thing. December 6th, we have another SciTech lecture, and it's, I think it's going to be number 60. I'm not too sure. You might have been number 60. We're up there. We've counted them. We know them all, but we have a very special one, too, again on the 6th. For those of you who are here, we'd all like to see you again. Dr. Gary Green is retiring from this institution after 17 years of really effective leadership. And so he's going to come in and he's going to talk about what he sees as the future for the training of students going forward in technical areas. And I think it's going to be a great lecture. And of course, as an alum, you're very welcome to come, and we'd love to see you. So thank you all for coming. It was a cold night, but a great lecture. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Expect to get some of that stuff to stop me from hurting, because I had plenty of